Round 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Upshot Podcast, where we are entering part 3 of the wild world of Mike Tyson. Joining me once again in the red corner, weighing in at... I prefer not to answer that.
Yeah, it's a gross breach of my privacy, Jack.
Apologies. Welcome, Zach.
Hello, Jack.
And welcome back, Will Richards, who's
Come on.
Still got a broken arm. Any more bits falling off you? Any ear?
I'm absolutely shattered. Literally. Come on, let's go. Yeah, come on.
But he's still here. He's Mitch Greening us all the way to the finale. And this is it, guys. We are going to pick up the thread just after Mike Tyson's infamous bite on each of Evander Holyfield's ears. That's where we left off last time. So the year is 1997. Diana's no longer with us. Mike is banned from boxing for probably a good old time. So he's suspended. He's stuck outside the ring. But if you're hoping he'd use that time to do some deadlifts and brush up on his German idealist philosophy, you are going to be disappointed, because Mike is spending his suspension doing 3 things: drugs, women, and shopping. So yeah, I mean, it's all Mike's vices. He's really at his...
Shopping wasn't the third one I was expecting there.
What were you hoping for?
What kind of shopping is he doing? Like,
He's making these regular trips to Versace on Rodeo Drive, you know, the sort of like most expensive shopping street in LA, where he'll go in and spunk like $500,000 on, you know, just like
Retail therapy.
Yeah, precisely. And then he'll go and buy a load of cars. It's all very out of hand. He's got a few cash problems actually at this point, because his lifestyle's just mental. Like I think his accounts from a year around this time is that he started the year $3 million in debt. He made $62 million, but he spent 65. So he's just back at square one, and he's not exactly reliable about paying his taxes. Fortunately, he does get a big windfall around this time, because the WWF, as it's then known, chuck him $6 million to appear at WrestleMania 14.
It was a good one.
Yeah, well, it's actually, I think it is considered one of the classics, this fight. So he serves as the guest referee in a fight between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels. And Mike's supposed to be in Shawn Michaels' corner, but as we'll see, it takes a twist.
Austin ducked it. Austin going for the stunner, and Michaels counter. Michaels going for another kick. Austin, he got it! The stunner! Mike Tyson in! Austin is the champion! Stone Cold! Stone Cold! Stone Cold! Wait a minute! Tyson is double cross the end! It's a double cross! You gotta be kidding me! Mike Tyson holding up the 316. Maybe this has been a setup all along. Oh my! A right hand! Tyson! Right hand! There goes Michaels!
That Stone Cold music gets me like every time.
Mike's obviously wearing his t-shirt that just says "fuck it" on the back.
he was made for wrestling.
Yeah, he says he really loves doing it. He's like he'd been asked previously, but after he lost to Buster Douglas, they got Buster Douglas on instead. Presumably a lot cheaper as well. And so he like really wanted to do it for ages. But he does also say that he was so coked up for the whole thing that he kept calling Stone Cold Steve Austin Cold Stone. So, you know, he's doing what he loves, which is coke and wrestling. But Mike soon has another major problem on his hands. So he's in the car with Monica, his wife, and she's driving when they get rear-ended by another car, causing a pile-up between them and a couple of other cars. And the blokes in the other cars get out and are immediately screaming. They're livid, kind of blaming her. They come round to her window and start screaming at Monica when, to their horror, Mike Tyson emerges from the passenger seat. It's about as bad as it gets.
Not who you want to run into in a road rage incident.
Yeah, and I think Mike must still have a bit of the WWF going on in his head, because he just immediately proceeds to beat everyone up. He says...
Just grabs a steel chair out of the boot.
I mean, it does sound quite WWF. He says, I just got out the car and started beating the shit out of everyone involved. I kicked the first guy in the balls, and then I slugged the guy who hit the first guy. So they're all just like fighting each other. Apparently one of the blokes he hits is 62, so I think he's seeing red at this point. He said, Monica was yelling and I had to be restrained by my bodyguard who was in the car in front of us. It's absolute chaos, and it's not good news for him because he's obviously on probation from jail still from the time he did for rape. Plus he's suspended from boxing for biting chunks out of Evander Holyfield's ears. Somehow around this time, though, he does still get his boxing licence back. I don't get the impression that the boxing authorities are totally scrupulous. But they do grant him a licence to fight Franz Botha, who's this South African guy. He's considered a genuinely tough opponent. But Mike, in the pre-fight press conference, is defiant.
Francois Botha, 6-1 underdog. Are there any concerns on your part?
I don't know anything about that. I don't know nothing about numbers. I just know what I can do.
How about
kill this mother?
Okay. Mike, why do you have to talk like that?
Well, I'm talking to you the way I want to talk to you. Do you have a problem? Turn off your station.
You know what? I think we'll end the discussion right now.
Then we could.
You got it. Have a nice fight, Mike.
Off.
He's really, in this era, he kind of gets better at the trash talk, I think.
In that clip as well, the news reporter is sort of reclining as if like Tyson's in the room and is about to hit him at any
Please
moment.
don't hit me, even though it's a video call. Anyway, he does go on to win that fight. It's pretty messy, though. Like, he's not training hard like he used to. He's smoking weed and taking coke basically up to the night of the fights and then sort of muddling his way through. And after the fight, he has a hearing for the road rage case where he beat those guys up who were screaming at his wife, and they send him back to jail. So it's once again, Mike Tyson's just like...
He's still got his boxing licence, though, at this point.
Yeah.
What do you have to do to get your boxing licence revoked?
Well, he lost it for a year.
For biting. Lost it for a year, so yeah, okay. But, but still, you'd think, like... violently assaulting people.
All the drugs as well.
Yeah, I mean, also,
drugs,
like, we've done a 3-part
conviction.
series, but honestly, if you read his book, there are probably like 30 other incidents of him just like randomly beating the shit out of people and then going to the police and suing him, and none of that seems to cost him his boxing licence either. Yeah, starting to think the people who run boxing might not be.
Are they just in this for the money or something?
Anyway, so he goes back into jail, and pretty quickly he's back in the hole, the solitary confinement we talked about in his last jail stint, because he assaults a guard. And he says he spends his whole time in jail just naked except for wearing a bandana, and every time the guards come into the hole he just throws things at them. Like he's properly losing his mind. But he does say at one point he gets put in this like section with these other kids who can't go into the main jail. Most of them are in for murder and are never going to leave jail. And he says he becomes a kind of father figure to them all, and they'll like come to him for life advice, and God knows what he tells them.
That was the last person you should go to for life.
But he does actually
love to see that in Mike Tyson life coaching session.
Yeah. But he does actually start like giving them all a lot of money, because once again fans are sending him in loads of money and his account swells. And at one point there's a guy in the jail section who dies. I'm not exactly sure how, probably a prison fight, and Mike pays for the funeral, sends some money to them. So he's got a bit of that Robin Hood thing going on, albeit in a slightly more sinister way. Anyway, he spends a year in the slammer and eventually gets out, and immediately he's thinking, okay, I need another fight, I need the money. And he lines up British heavyweight champion Julius Francis, who he's going to fight in Manchester in the year 2000. And long-standing Upshot listeners may recognise Julius Francis's name, because he is the guy who will later go on to work security at Box Park in London. And last year he starred in a viral video where there was this bloke who was basically being an absolute twat. He was like starting on the security staff at Box Park, and he's like really being super aggressive, and Julius the bouncer knocks him down with one punch and became an instant cult hero online. Got a clip, I'll link to it in the show notes. Julius has just knocked him down to the delight of the crowd. He's just flat out. Instant justice.
It's such a classic box park scene. That's exactly the kind of wanker that you get at box park.
Yeah, normally they don't get justice quite as quickly. But after that, so on Julius Francis has a Wikipedia because he was British heavyweight champ, and they added to his nicknames the Do-Rag Death Train because the guy he knocks out a do-rag, and then they added to his list of fights Do-Rag Man. It was like knockout first round. Anyway, we're back in 2000, and unfortunately the death train is out of his depth against Mike Tyson. Tyson knocks him down 5 times in the first 4 minutes before the ref eventually intervenes and stops the fight. But it does make Mike like a bit of a sensation in the UK, and he's quite enjoying it. He says in America he just gets like grief from the police, but in the UK he feels a bit more accepted. Which is, I have to say, I remember this, and I remember there being like a lot of protests about him coming to the UK, but he remembers it differently. And there are these videos of him getting like mobbed in Brixton, where he has to escape into a police station because there's like hundreds, maybe thousands of people just trying to get to him. It's pretty wild scenes. Anyway, he stays in the UK and fights again in Glasgow not long after that. And he says he basically spends the whole time in the UK just like banging coke, smoking weed. Even the night before the fight, he's doing it. And you're probably wondering, how is an elite athlete able to take drugs when they're competing at the highest level? Aren't they being tested? Well, Mike had a plan for that. He had access to something called a Whizzinator, it's a prosthetic penis that you strap on and then fill with clean urine. I think we've actually talked before about them because Maradona.
That's the old Maradona trick.
Yeah, the Whizzinator.
Is Whizzinator, is that the technical term, or was that Mike's nickname for it?
No, I thought the Whizzinator. I think it's a brand name.
It's the brand.
But I think it's like Hoover or Google. It's just like only known by that name. He says that everyone in his entourage who didn't do drugs had to cough up some clean urine as part of their loyalty to him. And then he said later, "It was awesome, man. I put my baby's urine in it. One time I was using my wife's urine and my wife was like, 'Baby, you better not hope it comes back pregnant or something.' And I said, 'Nah, we ain't going to use it no more. We're going to use the kid.' Because I got scared the piss might come back pregnant." So he's just like getting his baby. I don't know how you do that. You like wring out a nappy into it. I dread to think. But yeah, he's just using his own child's piss to pass the drugs test through the Whizzinator. Anyway, it works. He's cleared to fight, and he knocks out his opponent in 38 seconds. The ref stops the fight, so it's a technical knockout. As the ref's intervening to stop the fight, Mike even accidentally hits him too, which he later gets fined for.
Do you think being on coke is any kind of an advantage in a boxing fight?
If it's only 38 seconds long, I'd be inclined to say yes.
Yeah.
And if you're a brawler like Mike.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I guess it depends how soon before you've got in the ring that you had it, I guess.
Well,
we seem to ask this question quite a lot on the Upshot. I seem to remember exactly the same question that came up during the marathon episode, and I think the answer was
true.
Definitely wouldn't be good for a marathon though, would it?
I mean, maybe we need to do a special on what sport would be enhanced by cocaine.
I reckon power slapping is up there. I think you want something where it's a very short, energetic
power slapping is
burst.
probably perfect because your mouth would be sort of numb.
Yeah. Anyway, it sounds like he is on coke literally during it, because right after the fight, he takes the opportunity to call out the world heavyweight champion Lennox Lewis in one of Mike Tyson's most famous speeches.
I was going to rip his heart out. I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lennox is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody as ruthless. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
There's a lot going on there.
I want to eat your children.
Your children.
He does just find a way. You think like everything scary's been said, and then he's like...
He's very articulate considering he's just been in a boxing match. I guess it was only 38 seconds. He probably didn't take any blows.
Again, he doesn't take many blows, but he also says, I am actually embarrassed watching that back. I was losing my mind because of all the coke. So once again, it's the coke. Yeah, it's kind of a shame that his trash-talking ability peaks just as his boxing ability is like in decline. They go in opposite directions.
Yeah, maybe that's related to
it. Again, we're coming back to the coke. Yeah, a lot of his best speeches, he says later, I was under the influence of a lot of drugs at the time, which makes me think he was in the ring high on coke. Yeah, I think also, if you're Lennox Lewis watching that, like Lennox Lewis is a tough guy, but you'd be a bit scared, wouldn't you? sort of the mix of like invoking Alexander the Great.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, he
bit
just
of
said he's
Islamic
going to
scripture.
he's going to eat my children. So yeah,
I also enjoyed there's one of the guys in his entourage just being like, "Yeah, man," in the background, who reminds me a bit of the guy you know, in the previous. Just got a little cut in his ear.
it's like you see these like drill grind
Hype
videos
men.
where there's all the like hype men in the background, just like trying to like
Key part of the show. Unfortunately, though, Mike does lose a key member of his entourage around this time. I am, of course, referring to Kenya, the White Tiger. So, despite Kenya ripping the roof off his Maserati, like nearly killing his children anytime he went near them, Mike had held on to her and he loved her very dearly. But the final straw came when Kenya was chilling in Mike's garden back in Las Vegas, and the next door neighbour spotted her over the fence and decided to jump the fence to pet her and ended up nearly losing her arm. Apparently Kenya tried to rip it off, unsurprisingly.
I'm sorry, but the neighbour is asking for that. If you see a tiger on the loose in the next door neighbour's garden, do not jump over and go.
It's like going to a zoo and jumping in, which, to be fair, Mike Tyson would do, but any normal person. Mike actually says, like, I don't think, like, I thought they were crazy to do it, but I felt bad for her. So he gives her $250,000. He's quite generous at this point. But he does have to get rid of Kenya. He hands her over. She becomes property of a zoo, and he buys himself 2 new cubs. So he hasn't kicked the tiger habit quite yet. So Kenya's out of his corner, but Mike's mind is trained on the big Lennox Lewis fight. So, okay, he's had some slightly softer fights since coming out of jail. As much as I love Julius Francis, he's not quite in the league of some of Mike's foes of the past. But Lennox Lewis is a proper huge fight. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. And, Mike decides to prepare for this one a bit more seriously. He's training hard, but that doesn't stop him smashing coke constantly. And he flies to the pre-fight press conference high on the stuff. And, there's always like a bit of theatre in these press conferences, particularly these days where they kind of square up and shove each other around. But this time it does actually get really quite spicy. So Lennox comes and stands opposite Mike on these like little podiums they've got, and they square up, and pretty soon they're shoving each other, and a full-on fight breaks out. All their entourage burst in and try and break it up, and both Lennox and Mike are knocked to the ground. And while they're lying on the ground, Tyson decides to bite Lennox Lewis on the thigh, just to give him a little nibble. Apparently Lennox Lewis said he had teeth imprints in his leg for a long time afterwards. So I think it was like a...
He's just come back from a year's ban for biting.
Yeah, but...
I think it's kind of his thing now. I guess.
And I think it's like in a proper melee, and they're on the floor, no one's going to see it, and I think it's actually quite a clever intimidation tactic.
Yeah, because I guess then he's in his head then. He knows that Lennox Lewis knows that Mike's still a biter.
Yeah, I think if you're saying it's all tactics, then like Tyson's got to the point where people don't fear his boxing in the same way, but they might fear like losing something to his. Anyway, so he bites him. Eventually, like the fight's broken up. The like entourages pull them up onto their feet. Mike spits in the face of one of Lennox Lewis's bodyguards. He tries to hit his own bodyguard with a fire extinguisher. Like he's properly losing his mind. And then someone in the crowd yells, "Put him in a straitjacket," about Tyson, leading Mike to give another truly mental speech.
Put your mother in a straitjacket, you punk ass white boy. Come here and tell me if I fuck you in your ass, you punk white boy. You faggot. You can't touch me, you're not man enough. I eat your asshole alive, you bitch. Fuck you, you hoe. Come and say in my face, fuck you, ass for everybody. You bitch. Come on, you bitch. You scared coward. You not man enough to fuck with me. You can't last 2 minutes in my world, bitch. Look at you scared now, you hoe. Scared like a little white pussy. Scared of the real man. I'll fuck you till you love me, faggot.
He's basically in tears.
Yeah.
Like you can hear him crying.
There's quite a weird, like, sexual undertone to quite a lot of his speeches.
Yeah, I mean, this one's full on sexual.
Fuck you, tell her.
Eat your ass. Yeah. I also love his usually supportive entourage. Even they look quite baffled. There's a guy standing next to him who's just like, fucking hell.
Yeah, that's just to what, like a journalist in the crowd.
Yeah, some random guy who said put him
spotty CBS reporter.
You're scared like a little white pussy. But he sounds like he's going to cry. He's like sort of half crying. He does. Mike Tyson cries a lot. It's one thing I've learned in the making of this
Sensitive
series.
man.
Yeah.
I bet that reporter fucking shat himself.
Yeah.
I was melting just watching it.
It is quite scary. Do you think that's his most scary?
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. He looks like the least in control of himself there. Whereas in the other ones, it's like he's playing up to being the villain.
Yeah.
He's kind of lyrical. But that one, it's like a bit worried he might actually do the things that he's suggesting.
Yeah, you get the feeling with that one, like, if that reporter had been in the front row, he would have fucking swung for him. Like, he would have, as you say, he was completely out of control there.
Yeah. Or eating his ass.
Oh, he's just
and then cried.
Just bent them over.
I don't know which is more scary.
But then maybe once again, it's like the bite on the thigh is just like he's just making himself seem as unpredictable as possible.
Yeah.
He does put it down to the drugs. He reflects on that. He says like he's embarrassed about that speech and feels quite bad about it. But anyway, we move on as he has to, and he's focusing on the fight. He says his training's like not super serious. Like, yeah, he's working hard when he's in the gym, but just to illustrate, he chooses Hawaii as his training location because it has the best weed. So, like, he's burning it at both ends. He says during the time in Hawaii, he's just constantly high. He gives this really weird press conference where he tells the journalists, "I'm just like you. I enjoy the forbidden fruits in life too. I think it's un-American not to go out with a woman, not to be with a beautiful woman, not to get my dick sucked." Like, at this point, they're just like...
He is married at this point as well.
Yeah. I mean, sort of on paper. Monica, apparently, he just, like, never sees her. As we said, he doesn't even invite her to his birthday party. He's just, like, living a separate life, wiring her cash occasionally. But, yeah, his brain is a mess. And by the time the fight rolls around, he's physically not looking great either. So they ring the bell, and basically from the beginning, he's really sluggish. He says he can't really get started. Later, his friends speculate that he might have been drugged because he just looks so out of it. I mean,
has he drugged himself?
His explanation, he says, all those years of snorting coke and drinking and smoking weed and screwing around with massive amounts of women had finally taken their toll, which, yeah, I think...
That will happen.
That sounds about right. But he does make it to the 8th round where eventually Lennox Lewis knocks him out. He's just run out of gas. And actually... For once, he's quite respectful of his opponent afterwards. They do a joint interview together. There's like quite a sweet moment where he wipes the blood off Lennox Lewis's cheek, talks about how much he respects him. And, for once, he wins a bit of positive press. Here's how one journalist reports it. Tyson is a despicable character, a rapist, a thug you would not want within area code of your daughter. But it's going to be just a little bit harder to despise him now. Probably about as good as he can get out of the press by that point. Anyway, this is really the end of his serious fighting career. Like, this was his last shot at the title. It's the last time he looked like he could really mix it with the big boys. And away from the ring, he's also living an increasingly unusual life. So at this point, he has a new Dominican girlfriend who lives in quite a rough bit of Spanish Harlem. Sort of like the top of Manhattan, and he moves in with her, and he actually says I felt like I was among my people again, like I was back in Brownsville. So he says this is an area where like people are ODing on the streets, they're shooting at each other, and actually he feels like he really, really belongs. And he spends this time sort of like hanging out in drug dens. Have you ever seen those like gangster movies where there'll be women packing coke in like a drug den, and they all have to be naked so they can't...
American Gangster.
Yeah, American Gangster, that's the film. This is also the time when he gets his infamous face tattoo. So he says it was actually born of like just self-hatred. He just like wanted to deface himself. He originally though went to the tattoo parlor and asked them to do loads of hearts on his face.
Really?
Quite a different vision.
What is the actual...
It's like a
pattern?
Maori something. Yeah, the tattoo artist's just like, I've got a cool pattern. Let's do
it does. It does really look like one of the ones from they'll just have in the window.
Yeah, it's a bit of gap year tragedy. Yeah. But normally it's not on the face. Anyway, he gets that. His friends get a bit worried about him. They're like, you're really spinning off. And also they are worried that he's just going to get robbed and taken advantage of in Spanish Harlem because he's hanging out in these rough areas. But that is not a problem because somehow Mike, a man who's earned $300 million in his career, is running out of cash. So he's really circling the drain. A lot of Mike Tyson's money problems come down to three things. Women, he sends a lot of money to his girlfriends and wives and the mothers of his children. Legal cases, so getting sued. Among the people suing him at this time, Mr. Mitch Green. So
Come on, Mitch.
Mitch Green.
He's back.
Mitch Green sues Mike Tyson for like $50 million for the street fight. The very first time we met Mitch Green, and Mike, nearly killed him. He sues him for that. In the end, the jury actually only award Mitch Green about $40,000, so it's relatively cheap for Tyson. But these legal cases are happening like almost every week for Mike. He's just paying off people constantly, so he's getting bled dry on that front.
These are just people that he's assaulted.
Yeah, so some of them are people he says he did assault. Some of them he claims are just like people trying to stitch him up, and I think that's plausible. That like, given who he is, he says like everyone he employs in his house is like constantly falling off ladders, but also like he claims that like he's constantly accused of like groping women. I don't know. I'm inclined to believe he is doing quite a lot of that as well. The third way in which he is being bled dry is by all these hangers-on who are just steadily rinsing him for cash. He learns around this time that he's been getting completely shafted by Don King. He takes on some new financial managers and he learns that Don has just been taking the piss. So apparently Don was charging him rent to sleep in his own house. It was like an item on a bill. And Don's just like the master of all this financial chicanery.
When you look at pictures of Don back in like the 80s, you'd looking back, you're like, yeah, that guy is gonna scam you.
Yeah, I think Mike even knows it, right? We've kind of talked about moments where he's tried to fire him, but Don will always produce like a briefcase of $100,000.
A briefcase of his own money.
Apparently that goes on a long time around this. So he's suing Don King for like $50 million. And his financial advisors are like, all you have to do is just hold on till the day we go to court and Don will settle and you'll be rich again. And he's milking Don around this time, being like, oh, I might settle with you, Don. And Don's like sending him $100,000 here, $50,000 there, just to try and persuade him to settle. But Mike is just spending it all on his ridiculous lifestyle. And by 2003, he is down to his last $5,000. He can't even pay his staff in his house. And his financial advisors are like, whatever you do, don't declare bankruptcy, because then we won't be able to do the settlement with Don King. It will just be done by the bankruptcy guys. But Mike is desperate, and so, age 36 that year, he files for bankruptcy. He's $23 million in debt, despite earning $300 million over his career, and that's it. So his creditors take charge of a lot of his assets. He gives up all his houses, the Vegas 6-acre plot. His old house in Ohio, it actually becomes a church, and apparently the vicar and the other people working there have to remove Mike's tiger cages, and they have to prise mirrors off from the ceiling. It's just like,
just imagine them having to go in there and doing like a real deep exorcism. This house has seen some things, some unholy things.
Yeah, I think burn it down. Yeah. Just that is not consecrated.
Scorch the earth.
So he's got nothing now, and he moves in with this stripper who he's actually had 2 children with. She's living in Phoenix, Arizona, and he moves in with her, and he says they're living off bowls of cereal and chocolate bars. Like it's genuine poverty, which for Mike Tyson is like a mad place to end up. He does get the occasional payday. Like he can easily just command $50,000 for a public appearance. He just has to go and like be in the crowd at some kickboxing event. So he can still get money, but he'll just immediately piss it away on cars and cocaine. It's a bizarre lifestyle. And from the years of sort of 2003 to 2005, in his late 30s, he's just doing these shit payday fights for cash. And his final fight comes against Irish journeyman Kevin McBride, who Mike thinks is a complete joke. He calls him a palooka, which is just like a useless bloke. But he gives good talk in the press conference before. This is, I don't know if you've ever seen this clip. I actually couldn't find it, but Kevin McBride's like, I'm going to punch him with the whole of Ireland. And Mike Tyson just goes, I'm going to gut you like a fish. So he's still doing a bit of sharp tongue stuff, but he's a complete mess in the ring. He's out on his feet. And he says by the end, he's just like so out of breath leaning against the ropes. McBride just basically has to like prod him over with his index finger. He's knocked out. And that is it. Straight after that fight, Mike faces the press and announces his retirement from professional boxing. In truth, he'd been out the game for at least 5 years and just milking it for a bit of cash. But that's it. And, a lot of people might in that situation think, okay, I've got a chance for a clean break here. I've been bankrupt. I've got a little bit of money tucked away from these payday fights, but, you know, I can sort of start a new life. But Mike says all he thought to himself was, now I can go out and really have fun.
And he certainly does that. So despite being pretty much bankrupt at this point, he's still living the good life. So he's just hanging out with all these like multimillionaires who'll pay for everything. A friend of him takes him on his yacht to Saint-Tropez, and they're basically just cruising around the Mediterranean, partying with Victoria Beckham, the Prime Minister of Turkey, all these like Wall Street traders who are just like so excited to be around Mike Tyson.
Is that all one party, that lineup?
Yeah, so they start out in Saint-Tropez, they go into like Sardinia, basically just going around the Med, hanging out. Like he says at points they'll be parked up and there'll be a few yachts of like Wall Street traders parked alongside each other, and he's just taking like little dinghies between these boats, just like doing loads of coke with these traders. And in case you hadn't guessed it, his cocaine habit has gone up a notch by this point.
How can it go up a notch?
I think while his boxing career and his boxing training is still going on, he's still got to maintain some sort of like facade of fitness. Whereas now he just, you know, he can just fully throw himself into it.
He told a story at the very end of his boxing career, but he hadn't retired. He went to meet Don King just to milk him for some cash, and he flew with 0.5 kilo of cocaine sewn into his jacket.
Yeah, he's dealing with like big quantities a lot of the time. At one point on this European trip, he ends up in Romania, hanging out with the Romanian mafia. And in his book, he sort of implies that he got the Romanian mafia into coke. So he says that they're like hanging out, they're like wining and dining him around Romania. And at some point, he asks them all for coke, and they're like, "Oh." Like,
so he created a demand.
He introduced the Romanian mafia to coke.
Because there was no coke there before.
They weren't into it, and then apparently they managed to sort some for him, and he had this whole like brick of coke and started like offering it around, and all these guys absolutely loved it. So he's had his impact in Eastern Europe.
I'm sure the people of Romania are forever grateful for that contribution.
Exporter.
Yeah. So he ends up in Moscow, where he's hanging out with his therapist, who's this 70-year-old woman called Marilyn. So she'd been his therapist for a little while, and he'd become, they developed a really close relationship. He relied on her a lot for not only therapy, but for sort of like emotional support. Like she took on quite a motherly figure for him. And at some point she ends up moving to Russia. So while he's in Europe on this huge coke bender, he decides to go to Moscow to see her.
To introduce them to coke.
well, sort of. So he says that he spends the days in Moscow out with Marilyn. They go and visit like Tolstoy's house and like, the Museum of Communism and all these sort of nice sightseeing sort of things. And then by night he's just hanging out with oligarchs in their mansion, just like getting fucked on coke, shagging like rooms full of escorts.
So him and Marilyn is not a...
No, it's not a romantic thing. No, I think he's slightly embarrassed about what he's doing by night. So he sort of like wake up in the morning and have to be a bit sheepish and go off to have a look around Tolstoy's house with her.
Pretend he's not hungover at Lenin's tomb.
And yeah, like we said, he's pretty broke at this point. So he's out in Moscow one night and he bumps into the leader of Chechnya in a restaurant, and this leader of Chechnya is like really excited to meet him. He's really into boxing, and he offers him some money to go with him back to Chechnya to attend this boxing tournament, which everyone is like, this was not long after there'd been a war between Russia and Chechnya. It was like still pretty hairy, but you know, Mike will do anything for cash, so he goes and attends this boxing tournament. He does a couple of weeks in Amsterdam as well, where he's basically just holed up in this hotel doing gear and having orgies with escorts. This is kind of, this whole sort of chapter of his life seems a bit like a sort of European backpacking holiday if you're just like a cokehead multi-millionaire sports star.
Yeah, what, like interrailing?
Yeah.
It's an interrail trip, yeah.
I sort of also am picturing him a bit like who are the like European explorers who brought like potatoes and tomatoes, like Sir Walter Raleigh, and he like brought the potato back, and then everyone used it as like a decorative plant. I'm
He brought cocaine to Romania.
Yeah, the Romanians are using cocaine decoratively for like a century, and then he's like, no, you should hit that shit.
Yeah, it's always like those Victorian aristocrats who'd go on their grand tour of Europe.
Like Lord Byron.
Sort of like that. I'm
Sort
picturing
of
like
like
that. But like that, but more coke. Eventually he ends up going back to Vegas, where he settles into what sounds like quite a depressing routine. So he says he wakes up around 10 p.m. every night, gets on the coke. He's hitting bars at about 1, then some clubs on the strip. 6 a.m. they go back to some strip clubs, and then back to someone's mansion for an after party. And then, I don't know, you fall asleep at some sort of time in the afternoon, sleep, and then repeat really.
And he's just doing that every day.
Yeah. It's,
fun for a night.
Yeah, he's very much ingrained into this Las Vegas party scene, which sounds quite depressing.
Yeah.
He makes friends with this crooked plastic surgeon who, I think at this point his nose is quite fucked because he's just taking coke all the time. So this plastic surgeon friend of his will hook him up to a morphine drip. So he can get high like that, which is just,
I was wondering about, like, does he get into sort of heroin and stuff?
No, so he actually says that he took heroin once back in Brownsville. I think it was when he was young, but it made him really sick. Right. So yeah,
but he does hit up the morphine.
Does hit up the morphine drip. So yeah, it's a pretty mad life. At one point, an FBI SWAT team turn up at his house, and he kind of doesn't know what's going on. It's like all these guys with like jeeps and guns, and it turns out that guy that he's been hanging out with has done a string of drive-by shootings in Arizona and like murdered 8 people and injured 19 others or something.
What, and he'd just been like hanging with him at parties?
So this guy actually was had claimed to be a journalist, so he'd come to Mike's house and asked for an interview, and they'd just been hanging out.
And what, he was a serial killer?
Yeah, he was a serial killer. He's hanging out with some bad dudes.
Yes, some bad. Speaking of the SWAT team thing, also, there was another story I read, which is 10 days after 9/11, his house got raided. I can't remember what the crime was, some other crime he was accused of, by the Las Vegas police, and they brought like massive SWAT teams, helicopters, and they were all in like camouflage. And when they arrived there, he was like, why is the fucking army here? And one of his mates who was there, apparently, as these guys approached, just yelled to them, yo, we didn't do that Taliban shit. It's like,
yeah, that'll be the paranoia.
Yeah,
setting.
apparently it was too much CNN and cocaine. What other bad dudes is he hanging out with?
I think just a lot of like pimps and gangsters, right, the Las Vegas sort of big time
celebs,
drug dealers. Yeah, I think it's that sort of like weird crossover between kind of glamorous models and, I don't know, film stars and stuff, but also just like big time coke dealers. Actually, at one point he makes friends with an 80-year-old like big time coke dealer, and They hang out quite a lot, and you know the guy's 80. He dies of, I guess, natural causes or perhaps cocaine consumption. And in his will, he leaves his cocaine stash to Mike, which is really not what you should do.
A legal document. Does that work?
I mean, I don't think it was officially sanctioned.
Yeah,
scribbled on the back of a fag packet.
Which lawyer signed off?
Yeah. But anyway, they're a friend of theirs. So people are starting to get worried about Mike's coke habit by this point.
I am worried.
And even a friend of theirs who they've been partying with is like, Mike, you can't have his coke stashed. It's going to be really bad for you. But Mike gets left alone in his house at one point and just like trashes the place, turns it upside down looking for the coke. Like apparently even takes his bed apart because he thinks there might be hidden in the frame of the bed. God. It's like, yeah. Quite mad.
But he can easily just go to a party and score. Yeah,
so I mean he's like we said, broke at this point, but because he's Mike Tyson, people love hanging out with him, so they'll basically just give him coke to hang out with him, really. So he's kind of feeding off other people for that. But yeah, people start worrying about him a little bit. Naomi Campbell tries to get him off coke.
His old girlfriend.
His old girlfriend, yeah. And yeah, it gets to the point where even dealers are refusing to give it to him because...
Always a bad sign.
Yeah.
That's the canary in the mine, dead.
Yeah. And eventually Marilyn, his therapist, convinces him that he's got to go to rehab. So he heads off to this, it's like a real high-class Vegas rehab place. He's in there with film stars, pop stars, and he also starts seeing a counsellor for sex addiction, which I think he probably needs that as well.
Not before time.
Yeah. And through these counselling sessions, he begins to realise that he's had this unhealthy sex obsession for a while. One of the times he recalls is when he got an honorary doctorate from Ohio University in 1989. And he gets up there and they're expecting him to give this like inspiring speech, like congratulating everyone for getting their degrees and, you know, for getting his own honorary doctorate. And he says, I don't know what kind of doctor I am, but watching all these beautiful sisters here, I'm debating whether I should be a gynecologist.
That's a bit Cartman, that.
Yeah, it is a bit. Presumably that speech went down like a fucking level.
Yeah, so apparently they were absolutely horrified.
It's a grim joke
in
any scenario.
Yeah, especially all these people who've been studying for like 3 years for their degree. But yeah, anyway, rehab doesn't really work for Mike, and he's back out partying. Just that Las Vegas party scene swallows him back up again. He's on the 10 p.m. wake-ups routine, out all night. So it's in the midst of all of that in 2008 when he gets cast in the Hangover film. So Mike says that at this point he was taking so many drugs that he didn't even know that he'd been cast in this film. Like, I think his managers had sorted him out.
Oh, he like didn't remember the conversation.
Yeah, he just didn't recall it at all. Until he ran into Zach Galifianakis and Bradley Cooper in the VIP area of a club the night before they were supposed to be filming, and they were like, "Hey, Mike, like, yeah, we're filming together tomorrow." And he's like, "What?"
Aren't they in like Bangkok as well?
That's Hangover Part 2.
The first one's in Vegas,
Yeah.
so he's out
in his backyard.
Yeah. Probably why he agreed to do it. But yeah, he says that he absolutely loved the process of filming this film. He does also say that he was high on coke for the entirety of filming, and he had an escort with him who he'd shag between scenes.
What, just like off camera?
Yeah, she was just hanging out on set, and
right.
Yeah,
so rehab went well.
I believe they call that a fluffer.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. They're kind of indulging him, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, this film was a huge success. He says that kids start recognising him on the street. So he'll be walking down and kids with their parents be like, "Look, it's Mike Tyson, the actor." And so he's kind of been discovered by a new generation of people who don't know him as a boxer but know him as an actor. And from then he goes off and does quite a lot of films.
Yeah, so I'm somewhat of an expert in Mike Tyson's acting career, not boxing career, but as you said, he has a lot of films. So I've picked.
That was why we got you on.
Yeah.
Mainly for your expertise
the Tyson
in the
film
career.
Expert, right? So I picked 5 of his most intriguing and noteworthy films and reviewed and ranked them for you.
Beautiful.
So in at number 5 is China Salesman. So this is a Chinese production, and I think it might relate to Mike Tyson's affinity with the Chinese culture.
Does speak Chinese. Famously.
Right. So in the China Salesman, a hero Chinese IT salesman goes to North Africa for a work trip and comes up against mercenary Mike Tyson and warlord Steven Seagal in a face-meltingly stupid martial arts film. 13% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Hey, it's Tyson playing himself as a
No,
mercenary.
sorry, this is Mike Tyson
it's
playing...
genuine acting.
He's playing a mercenary... Yeah, so this is where he's doing genuine acting. He's playing a bad guy, which he often does.
13%.
There's comically bad and then there's just bad. Variety called it a jaw-dropping misfire that suffers from a nonsensical plot, subpar acting and awkward dialogue. So that's number 5.
Sounds about right.
Number 6 is Rocky Balboa, which is the 6th installment of the Rocky franchise. And this is where Tyson established himself as the best actor to play himself. So it's sort of a foreshadowing of The Hangover, which is in at number 3. I watched The Hangover for research purposes, of course, and Mike Tyson flawlessly played himself, as we just discussed. I watched it and it's very lowbrow, but I was laughing consistently throughout. And if you can't judge a comedy by how much you laugh, then how can you? So yeah, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure.
It's very
I remember not
philosophical.
liking it that much.
Oh really?
It's quite good, yeah.
Let's
Of
not
its
get into that.
genre.
Yeah. Yeah, and at number 4, this is one of my favourites, is Girls 2, Girls vs. Gangsters. So this is another Chinese production, and Chinese films generally need the blessing of the Chinese government to be released. So they saw the successful formula of a stag do film featuring Mike Tyson and thought, we'll have some of that. So in Girls 2, Girls vs. Gangsters, the girls go to Vietnam on a hen do, wake up on the beach with no memory of what happened the night before, with no money, and encounter eccentric gangster Dragon, played by Mike Tyson, and get up to all sorts of misadventures. Does that
So it's
plot
basically
sound familiar?
basically like the plot of Hangover.
Right, right,
Also
right.
sounds
Chinese
quite
Hindi.
good.
Yeah.
Is he doing like full dialogue in Mandarin? Or?
I think he speaks in English in
Right,
this one.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I know he does because I watched it.
Because I've watched it 9 times.
Yeah. And at number 1 is Kickboxer Retaliation. 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's no surprise as it stars Mike Tyson, Jean-Claude Van Damme,
Knew it.
the Icelandic world's strongest man, Bjorn something, and Ronaldinho.
Yeah, we talked about this on Ronaldinho episode.
And I was thinking, you had me at Ronaldinho with this
Agreed.
one. And so the number 5 in this list, China Salesman, that's a martial arts film. This is how to do a martial arts film, The Kickboxer Retaliation. It's a good old romp, and I would thoroughly recommend.
I remember watching a trailer.
Yeah.
Doesn't
yeah.
Ronaldinho's lines all get cut because he just can't deliver them? So he's just sort of there, like smiling. And
Yeah,
then,
he's
like,
just in the background. Yeah.
Doing kick-ups.
is he doing football shit?
I feel
Yeah.
like he does kick a ball at...
Yeah.
Yeah, he like
Yeah.
knocks someone out with a
Van Damme
ball.
was
correct.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
George,
Yeah.
you were on the Ronaldinho episode as
He
well.
does a few keepy uppies and then
Yeah.
volleys
Kicks
the
it
ball into
hard.
someone's face and they go flying into a wall.
I mean,
I
yeah,
think
thi-
the scene the bricks go at.
Yeah, he like
through a wall.
it hits them through the wall. And then does
It's pretty epic.
yeah.
But this is my number 1 film, and
of all films.
of Mike Tyson films, and I haven't even seen it, so that says a lot. In fact, of those 5, I've only seen The Hangover. But you know, there's nothing like a good synopsis read
I know
and a
what
few
you're doing
clips
this-
on YouTube.
This weekend you're doing the Tyson Marathon, aren't you?
Yeah.
I quite like to watch Girls too.
Yeah. I mean, we got a clip, haven't we?
What about you?
I'll stay. If they come, I'll try to stop them.
Dragon Oba, you are a brave man.
Dragon, I'll just give you guys 3 more minutes. You can pretend I'm not around, okay?
They're
So he's like
they're chained to each other. The Hindu party,
and so one of them's
and one of them
in
is
love with Mike Tyson, who's
Yeah.
playing a slightly more dreamy sort of
Yeah.
yeah.
hero than
I think he has a
expected.
sort of redemption arc in this
Almost
film.
forgot.
Seems it.
Think by any chance I could have your WeChat number?
That's a plug.
That is the perfect line. You're really not expecting that.
Oh wow!
That's their WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
That's so good.
That is brilliant. So actually, he has a meaningful sort of. It's quite similar
Yeah.
to like Jean-Claude Van Damme's career. That sort of like B movie.
Yeah, Steven Seagal as well.
Do you know Steven Seagal? Have you ever heard his reggae album?
No, I haven't.
Oh my god! The first track on he did a whole reggae album. The first track on it, the first words he says, it's just Steven Seagal going, "Me one de punani." I really recommend. Listen, it's on Spotify.
Yeah. So anyway, with this new film career, Mike kind of sees an opportunity to reinvent himself, really, and he finally manages to kick the coke. Still doing these weird sort of cameo appearances for cash. So he goes on Entourage, Dancing with the Stars Italy as well.
Right.
He gets really into magic mushrooms and weed. So apparently read somewhere he's spending 34 grand a month on weed.
Right.
He also endorses Trump in the 2016 presidential race.
He's like super into shrooms and weed for like therapeutic.
Yeah.
Is that just a fucking?
I mean, it's
found a loophole.
Very
the
Joe
coke
Rogan,
replacement.
isn't it? That?
Yeah.
As is endorsing.
Yeah.
Well, do they? Trump's his mate. Like,
Yeah,
from
they
way
know
back
they know
when.
each
Good
other.
point.
They go way
Yeah.
back.
If
yeah,
anyone knows
Yeah.
what Donald Trump's like at cutting a
Yeah.
deal and looking after you,
Yeah.
Although wasn't Donald Trump quite shit at
Yeah, he said
striking
Trump was
deals with
shit.
him? Yeah. Anyway, he's forgiven that. He still does a little bit of boxing. So 2020, he does an exhibition bout against Roy Jones Jr., who's another former boxer. Fight ends up in a draw. Tyson actually says afterwards that he was completely fucked on shrooms for the fight.
it's quite impressive. Then.
Yeah.
Apparently he looked. I'd never watched it, but apparently he actually looked decent.
Yeah.
Did you see there was a clip a couple of years ago of him pummeling this guy on a plane? So to be fair, we'll put the clip in the show notes, but this guy is basically being a bit of a dick, it seems like trying to get a photo with him and just not leaving him alone.
Was he sat
And
behind?
He was
Tyson?
sat behind him on the plane and keeps hassling him, and eventually Mike loses the plot and beats the shit out of him.
JetBlue, mid-flight. My boy just got beat up by Mike Tyson. Turn that way. Yeah, he got f***ed up. Just trying to ask for an autograph, man. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, he's my favourite part.
The guy's looking really sad with
the
a
guy's
cut.
face afterwards.
He's got a gash on his head. He's making.
He looks like he's about to burst into tears.
He's like got the face of like a baby when they're about to cry.
Yeah,
I think he got off lightly, really.
That's excellent. I'm
yeah,
with Tyson.
I'm
Yeah.
Camp Tyson on that as well.
On that one.
The courts are too because he doesn't face any criminal charges
Really?
for it.
Is that a
yeah.
defence? The guy's fucking annoying.
Yeah, it's quite a good defence, I think, in this case. So yeah, he's still sort of just hanging out with celebrities as well. The same year as that plane incident, he does the Hajj with DJ Khaled, which I love.
Yeah, that is. That's very 2020, isn't it?
Mike Tyson, imagine doing the Hajj, just like having this like intense religious experience. You're like doing laps around the Kaaba, and then you look to your side and it's just DJ Khaled and Mike Tyson. It's like, mate, I'm trying to be in touch with God. Yeah. Have you also seen that video of him meeting Hasbullah? You know, the like small guy who hangs out with all the like UFC fighters. And Mike Tyson, he just like picks up, like Hezbollah's sort of punching Mike Tyson, like play fighting, and Mike just picks him up and starts doing raspberries in his ear,
tickling him.
Well,
does he think he's?
Yeah,
he thinks that he's a child.
Man.
He's like 26, isn't he? Hezbollah?
Yeah, and that pretty much brings us up to date. So obviously last Friday he had his fight against Jake Paul.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, apparently he got 20 million for it, so he's loaded again.
Yeah, for how long?
Yeah, I don't know, he doesn't seem very
he's
good
apparently spending 34 grand a month on weed. So.
Good point. Don't know what the car situation is.
Yeah,
he is happily married though, isn't he? He's quite settled now.
Yeah.
I'd say he's in a sort of elder statesman role where he's quite embarrassed and sort of like open about his past, behaviour.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He's found peace seemingly.
Yeah, I hope
considering the lows that he's experienced during his career, he's come out of it pretty well.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That is the Mike Tyson story, all three parts of it. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening as much as we have. But everyone's probably, like us, quite ready to exit that.
Yeah. Sorry if we chewed your ear off.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, Will, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic trilogy of appearances and only one broken arm to show for it. Thanks, Zach.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, George, on production.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.